Conjuring Last Rites is about to hit theaters. But what if I told you that Hollywood has already censored the most horrifying parts of the true story? What if I told you that the real Smurl haunting wasn't just about shadows in the corner, strange noises in the attic, but about assaults so graphic, so psychologically devastating, that no studio could ever put them on screen? Tonight, I'm taking you past the movie trailers, past the ratings board, and straight into the real nightmare. The Smurl family endured a nightmare so disturbing, it could never make it to Hollywood. This isn't just another ghost story. This is 15 years of inescapable torture, of a demon that attacked in ways too obscene for cameras, and a family broken by horrors no child should ever witness. This is what Conjuring Last Rites 1T show you. Because the real story is worse than any horror film. The sexual assaults Hollywood can't show. The graphic reality, here's the part you'll never see in theaters. Jack and Janet Smurl, the parents of 4 young daughters, both claimed they were sexually assaulted by whatever lived inside their home, and not just once. These attacks became the rhythm of their lives, week after week, year after year, until the trauma was carved into their very existence. Jack's description is something Hollywood would never dare script. He described a succubus, a demon, as an old woman with a young body, red eyes, green gums, and scaly skin that felt like sandpaper. This wasn't a shadow at the foot of the bed. This wasn't a dream. Jack said it was real. The weight, the touch, the smell. He would wake up violated, gasping, and broken. Janet's ordeal was no less horrific. She described a male entity that forced itself on her with terrifying strength. Her words were chilling. It felt completely real. The weight, the smell, the pain, and the worst part, it didn't stop. The attacks came 2 or 3 times a week. Imagine that, for over a decade, not months, not years, but more than 10 years of relentless torment. Even when the Smurls fled their home, the attacks followed them. During family camping trips, during hotel stays, they could never escape. And sometimes, the entity changed shape in ways so grotesque, they defy imagination. Jack once reported it appeared as a pig on legs, lurching toward him as it prepared to strike. Try to picture that. Try to imagine living with that nightmare, knowing it could come back any night, anywhere. And here's why Hollywood won't touch this part of the story. There is no rating system in existence that allows depictions of supernatural sexual violence. It's the kind of horror that doesn't belong on a screen because it belongs to real trauma. Now, here's where it gets even darker. The children's witnessing, because the Smurls for daughters weren't shielded from these horrors. They saw them, they heard them, and they knew what was happening to their parents. Dawn, the oldest, was only 8 years old when she walked into her parents' bedroom and saw something she would never forget, a dark thing on top of her father. Think about that. An 8-year-old forced to witness her father being attacked by something inhuman. That single moment haunted her for decades, requiring years of therapy. The other children weren't spared either. They may not have seen every detail, but they knew something horrific was happening. Imagine being a child and realizing your parents, the people you depend on to protect you, were being attacked by an unseen monster. That kind of psychological wound doesn't heal, and it destroyed the Smurls' family dynamics from the inside out. And here's where Hollywood steps in to sanitize. In the film, you'll see hints of possession. You'll see shadows, screams, and maybe even demonic faces. But you won't see what the real children witnessed. You won't see the intimate violence that ripped this family apart, because the truth is too raw, too disturbing, and too real for cinema. Unlike the 2-hour resolution of a horror movie, this wasn't something that ended after one act of heroism. It was just the beginning of a 15-year nightmare. The 15-year nightmare now Hollywood, ending the relentless duration. When you sit in a movie theater, you know the story will wrap up in about 2 hours. But the Smurls didn't have that luxury. Their haunting didn't last weeks. It didn't last months. It consumed 15 years of their lives. From 1974 to 1989, nearly the entirety of their daughters' childhoods was spent in the shadow of something malevolent. There was no pause button, no rolling credits, just day after day of dread. And as the years passed, the entity didn't fade away. It grew bolder, more violent, more cruel. Christmas morning, 1985, while other families were unwrapping presents, the Smurls' children woke up to a holiday turned into a nightmare. Every single gift beneath the tree was destroyed, toys ripped apart, wrapping paper shredded, the sound of laughter replaced with screams as the entity terrorized them in the very moment. that was supposed to symbolize joy and innocence. The psychological toll was catastrophic. The girls' teachers reported that all 4 daughters seemed constantly exhausted and haunted. Their grades plummeted. Their eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. Imagine being a child, already fighting to survive schoolyard life, while secretly enduring nightly horrors no one believed. The failed exorcisms. When God couldn't help, Hollywood loves exorcism scenes. A priest holds up a cross. Latin is shouted. The demon shrieks. And then, victory. But the Smurls lived through something different. Something far darker. 3 exorcisms were attempted in that Chase Street home. Each one failed. And with each failure, the demon grew stronger. Father McKenna, one of the priests who tried to help, described his first ritual. He said the entire house groaned like a living thing. The walls shook, the floorboards buckled, and he fled. A priest, who had devoted his life to fighting evil, ran from the house in terror. During the second exorcism, something even more chilling happened. The entity laughed. Not a scream, not silence, laughter. And as the priests prayed, the words "Get out" appeared, written in blood on the mirrors of the home. This wasn't a retreat, this was mockery. And then came the third attempt. The family gathered together as priests once again tried to cast the thing out. But this time, all 4 daughters convulsed at the same time. Their bodies shook violently, as if something had seized them all in unison. The priests were powerless, the Smurls were powerless, and the demon remained. Now, here's the part no film will ever show you. In 1989, a 4th ritual was conducted. This time, the Catholic Church used what they called extreme measures. To this day, the details remain hidden. The family signed NDAs. The church has never disclosed what happened inside that house. All we know is that after this ritual, the activity finally began to subside, but the scars never healed. But if you think the assaults and failed exorcisms were the worst of it, you'd be wrong. And here's where I pause to ask you something. If you've made it this far into the Smurl's nightmare, you know this isn't your typical Hollywood ghost story. This is the kind of horror that lingers. If you're finding yourself drawn deeper into this darkness, make sure you hit that like button, because trust me, you'll never forget this story. Because the entity wasn't just violent, it was intelligent, sadistic, and it knew exactly how to tear the Smurl family apart from the inside. The entity's sadistic intelligence. By now, the Smurls had learned something chilling. This entity wasn't random. It wasn't just lashing out blindly. It was intelligent, sadistic, and it knew exactly how to break each family member in the most personal way possible. Take Shannon, the youngest daughter, at just 5 years old. She nearly died when a ceiling fixture came loose and crashed down where she was playing. Doctors said it was a freak accident, but the Smurls knew better. The fixture had been reinforced months earlier. This wasn't random. The entity had tried to kill her. Karen, only 3 years old, became another target. The demon began mimicking family members' voices. Janet would hear her mother calling from upstairs, only to find her mother wasn't home. Karen would hear her father's voice, beckoning her toward dangerous places in the house. At 3 years old, she couldn't tell the difference, and that's what made it so terrifying. The entity wanted her to follow. It wanted her vulnerable. Then there was the babysitter. One evening, while watching the children, she claimed Jack appeared at the bottom of the stairs, calling her upstairs, but Jack wasn't home. When she followed the figure, she realized too late that the thing waiting for her wasn't human. She ran screaming from the house and never came back. Even Heather, at 4 years old, wasn't spared. She developed an imaginary friend, a shadowy figure she played with in her room. But when Janet asked her to describe him, Heather said things no child should know. Sharp teeth, glowing eyes, long nails. This wasn't a game, it was grooming. The entity was planting itself in her mind. This wasn't haunting, this was psychological warfare. And the target wasn't just Jack and Janet, it was their children, one by one. Most haunted house stories end when the family leaves, but for the Smurls, escape wasn't an option, because the entity followed them, everywhere. At Jack's workplace, a cement plant equipment malfunctioned only when he operated it. Machines sparked, tools flew. Co-workers reported strange shadows darting past them. Even there at work, Jack wasn't safe. The family once fled to the Pocono Mountains for a camping trip. They thought fresh air and distance might give them peace. But in the middle of the night, their tent shook violently. Shadows pressed against the fabric. The girls screamed as inhuman growls circled them. They packed up and fled before sunrise. Even the wilderness wasn't safe. Hotel stays were no different. The same things happened. Scratches appeared on the walls. Toilets flushed at exactly 3:33 a.m. And when the family lay awake in bed, they'd hear something breathing in the dark, waiting, watching. The entity wasn't bound to Chase Street. It was tied to them. And that's why Hollywood will never show you this version. Because contained horror is safe for audiences. But inescapable horror, that's real. That's what the Smurls lived through. The Warren evidence Hollywood ignores. Skeptics love to dismiss cases like this, but the Smurl haunting left behind something undeniable. Documented proof. And most of it came from Ed and Lorraine Warren, the same investigators who inspired the Conjuring films. The Warrens recorded over 40 hours of audio inside the Chase Street home. Not vague bumps, not faint whispers, but clear, distinct voices. One recording captured a guttural growl. "You filthy bastard, we're going to kill you." Another shouted obscenities no child should hear. And these weren't single events, they happened repeatedly. Temperature logs from investigators showed impossible drops 30 degrees in just seconds. A crucifix was hurled across the room and embedded 2 inches deep into a plaster wall. Lorraine Warren herself claimed she saw not one, but 4 entities, feeding off the family's fear like parasites. Even the Warrens weren't safe. Lorraine was pushed down a staircase. Ed collapsed with sudden chest pains during an investigation. These weren't staged moments for dramatic effect. These were real, documented experiences. In August 1986, the haunting spilled into public view. Chase Street turned into a tourist attraction. Hundreds of gawkers swarmed daily. Neighbors charged for parking. Vendors sold snacks to ghost hunters. The Smurls were living in a nightmare, and the world treated it like entertainment. Neighbors reported hearing screams, blood-curdling, human screams from the house when the family wasn't even home. And every time media attention spiked, so did the activity. It was as if the entity thrived on spectacle. The more people watched, the stronger it became. Hollywood will show you the Warrens as saviors, brave heroes entering the haunted home. But the truth, the Warrens spent 3 years investigating, and in the end, they couldn't stop it. No one could. That's the horror you'll never see in theaters. And if you're sitting there wondering, if this was all real, why haven't you heard these details before? Well, that's exactly the point. What you're hearing right now is what Hollywood won't touch. The parts of the Smurl haunting that can't be packaged into safe scares and box office profits. If you want more stories that peel back the Hollywood gloss and expose the raw terror beneath, make sure you subscribe, because the tales only get darker from here. But the most disturbing part of the Smurl haunting wasn't the screams or the failed rituals. It was what came after. The aftermath Hollywood won't acknowledge. By 1988, after more than a decade of torment, the Smurl family finally left their Chase Street home. Shockingly, after they left, the new tenants reported nothing unusual. No scratching, no shadows, no voices, which means one thing: the haunting wasn't about the house. It was about the Smurls themselves. They were the target, the chosen victims. The children grew into adults, but the scars never faded. Relationships collapsed under the weight of their trauma. Most of them delayed or outright feared having children of their own. Janet admitted years later, in 2010, "We thought going public would help, but it made everything worse. The world mocked them, the media exploited them, and Hollywood sanitized their story into entertainment." And then, in 2017, Jack Smurl died. His final words, according to his family, were, "It's still out there." Whether he meant the entity or something deeper, no one knows. So why won't you ever see this on screen? Because no rating system, not R, not NC-17, could ever contain the graphic sexual torture the Smurls described. Because no studio wants a story without resolution. In movies, the Warrens banished the demon. The family is saved, but in reality, the Smurls never found peace. And the children, they never got their childhoods back. There was no savior, no last-minute miracle. Just a family, broken piece by piece, by something no one could stop. So when you sit down this weekend to watch The Conjuring Last Rites, remember, what you're seeing is the safe version. The version that can be sold with popcorn and soda. The real Smurl haunting was far worse. 15 years of sexual torture, psychological warfare, and relentless trauma that no priest, no psychic could ever resolve. Whether you believe in demons or not, the documented suffering of the Smurls proves one thing: horror doesn't always end when the credits roll. Hollywood gave you the polished version. I've given you the forbidden truth. If you want to uncover more real horrors that the movies won't touch, make sure you subscribe this channel and comment which movie's true story you want to hear next, because once you know the truth, you can never look at these stories the same way again.